freedom's the answer. What's the question? You're listening to Ernest Hancock.
I want to break free. I want to break free. I want to break free from your lies.
Yeah, we want to break free here on Declare Your Independence, Part 2. Part 2 with Robert Mazur. You know, we were talking off air. We ended it. I'm going, no, heck no. We're going to be talking about this on the air. So this is another little addition to information for all of us here. And go ahead. We'll start back with the conversation you're saying on when you're talking to people. One, who were you talking to, and what they say about who's the largest money launderer on the planet. So go ahead and tell us that. Robert Mazur, the infiltrator, my secret life inside the dirty banks behind Pablo Escobar's Medellin cartel. So listen to this. This is good information you need to know. Go ahead.
Well, what I was mentioning to you is, and I detailed this in my book, but there was I used to socialize with the dirty bankers and the drug traffickers, and because in order to manipulate their confidence, you can't just go in and do a transaction and leave. So this was an event that occurred. It's probably about, I don't know, in the early morning hours at a social club in Miami, and there in the conversation, and the person with whom I was speaking was a guy by the name of Akbar Bilgrami. Akbar Bilgrami was a very, very high-ranking officer within Bank of Credit and Commerce International in their Miami office. That's where they ran all of their Latin American division operations from. So everything that happened in South America or related to South America went through Miami. And as we were having a few drinks, he said, the biggest money launderer in the United States is, and being a typical agent, I was sitting at the end of my chair waiting to get this great information about a case I thought I'd be bringing back to the office. And he said, well, the biggest money launderer in this country is the Federal Reserve. And I said, how's that? And he said, well, you know about the sinister window, don't you? And I said, no, tell me more. And he said, well, right now it's totally legal at the Bank of the Republic in Colombia, who, of course, has all the central banks around the world have account relationships with the Federal Reserve for the dollars that they deal in. So what he was saying is that the central bank in Colombia had this window and invited the heavy hitters to bring as much U.S. dollars as they wanted to the Bank of the Republic, and they could anonymously exchange it for Colombian pesos. But thereafter, those dollars, and we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars, and over a period of time, billions of dollars, being put on pallets, shrink-wrapped, and flown out of Colombia and brought to the United States and taken to the Federal Reserve, where it is turned into a bank balance on behalf of the Bank of the Republic. And as Mr. Bilgrami said to me, don't you think there's somebody at the Federal Reserve with enough common sense to sit back and go, why are we getting billions of U.S. dollars from the Central Bank of Colombia? It doesn't make any sense. Well, the most obviously, drugs are sold for cash. You don't sell drugs for credit card balances. And that's really where all that money was coming from. And it wouldn't have taken a rocket scientist, and most certainly there had to be someone there who would have seen this huge blip on the radar screen of all this currency coming in. Now, that became such a politically hot issue that in the early 1990s, about 1992 or 1993, the central bank in Colombia shut that window down. But if your listeners just go Google sinister window, Colombia money laundering, they'll eventually come across the references to the sinister window that used to exist.
Okay, so why did they shut it down? I mean, at first it's open. The Federal Reserve knows. The U.S. government knows. Central Intelligence, FBDEA, blah, 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 they all know. The alphabet soup up. The United States federal freaking government knows. Department of Justice knows. Everybody knows. Everybody knows. So they shut it down. Why?
Well, I think they shut down the sinister window because it's politically impossible to justify having that window. That doesn't change the fact that there's a large amount of U.S. dollars that come back from many central banks, including the central bank in Colombia. But the actual sinister window itself was shut down. If you look at today's activity, another thing your readers can go to see this, HSBC Bank, Hong Kong Shanghai Bank Corporation, is presently the subject of a criminal investigation in New York, a federal grand jury investigation. And the heart of that investigation has to do with the fact that that HSBC office in New York is alleged to have been repatriating somewhere around $8 or $9 billion a year from Mexico on a continuous basis. The banking business, the international banking business, has a revenue stream that comes from buying and selling bulk currency. I have seen records and can tell you that on a $40 billion gross of dealing in currencies, there are international banks that have made as much as 10%, $4 billion, on the profits. But where do you think the money is coming from when you're bringing in $40 billion or from some of these countries, which have a high profile for being havens for major drug organizations?
It's
so we don't have
black
to go
market,
back.
fill in the blank. It could be white slavery, prostitution, drugs, kiddie porn, whatever. It's whatever you make illegal, man, you make a profit.
Well, you don't have to go back to 1993 to see that kind of movement of bulk currency around the globe. It's happening now, and we'll be hearing soon. The rumors are, and I've seen some articles that have been appearing recently, that grand jury investigation on the HSBC is allegedly coming to a head, and some of the predictions are a fine of $1 billion.
Big deal.
Yeah, that's what I say. Big deal. That's the cost of doing business.
Yeah, they just factor that in. Heck, they're probably lucky it's only $1 billion.
And the only way you're going to change that, and I know you don't agree with this, but in my view, the only way you're going to change that kind of behavior is to start locking up some high-ranking bank people who think that they are much smarter than the rest of the world.
Like who? Ben Bernanke? I mean,
I don't care. I'd go in and find out right now who. I think, and hopefully the government has found out who it is that put together the business deal to bring in tens of billions of dollars from places like Mexico, and it wouldn't be very difficult. It wouldn't be very difficult to be able to substantiate that the individuals who did that did it knowing full well that they were bringing dirty money back into the United States. And I think that as of right now, as long as the law exists, I'd rather see the resources of law enforcement applied toward that than the two guys at age 20 and 21 who sold enough crack for me to hold in two hands and wound up going to prison for life. That's my biggest complaint. I just think it's a total imbalance.
It's
of
stories
the administration of justice.
exactly like that have increased the population of LEAP. I mean, it's that kind of injustice. It's that kind of just insanity that these guys go, man, and it's never too late. I mean, a lot of these, I'll tell you one story. I just interviewed a guy. You'd like this one. His grandfather started the Native American church, to try and maintain, back in the mid-1800s, maintain the spiritual aspect of Native Americans, blah, blah, blah. And it went through a lot of different court cases and recognized and all that kind of stuff. And there was a recent Utah Supreme Court decision. And Utah Supreme Court, you would think a little bit more about religious freedom, in light of the Mormon thing there and so on. And what they did is they said, look, as long as you're using some naturally grown herb, peyote, marijuana, or any whatever, cocoa leaf, whatever, in some kind of religious sacrament, boom, you're on your own. It's all good. Here's your card. So all of a sudden, you'll see on Freedom's Phoenix, they started advertising on Freedom's Phoenix. You join their church for, I don't know what it is, $100, $200 or whatever it is. I'm a member of your church, and I'd be smoking my sacrament. So I'm going, this is the kind, and the guy doing that now was a undercover narc. And he's with LEAP, and he knows how detrimental, and he went back to his roots, Native American kind of whatever, and he's like, it's amazing the number of people in LEAP that have, from your experiences just like yours, that he was telling me stories of how many people he put away forever and young kids and this, and it just gets to a point to where they, to rationalize all the effort that you put in to your book and who the bad guys really are and what this funds and everything. It has to eat at you that these young kids in jail for the rest of their lives, while this injustice is done to the guys that profited from it, get a slap on the wrist. But it is expected. That's what happens all the time. So talk to these guys. I'm sure they share a lot of the experiences that you have. I've heard a lot of their stories, and I'm just like dumbfounded, man. I'm like, how were you able to go through the mental gymnastics? I learned a new word, cognitive dissonance. I keep hearing that all the time. I had no idea what they were talking about. So I look it up and so on, and it's like holding two competing, diametrically opposed ideas or principles in your head. It's like trying to do mental gymnastics to rationalize both things. We have to prosecute the drug war, but we don't want to have these kind of things happen. And I'm going, sooner or later, one's going to have to win out. Sooner, or you're just going to go crazy. You're going to have to go, look, man, we got, freedom's the answer, what's the question? Or it's going to be, all right, we just got to, you break the law and we got a law, go get the law, which is kind of what you're doing but you want to go after the higher, more profile people profiting from this. And I'm telling you, with the story that you just said about the Federal Reserve, of course they know it's coming from drug money. Of course. But who are you going to tell? Who's going to prosecute them? Who's going to go, hey, man, it's not a law. And guess what? They make sure it doesn't become a law neither. So it's just another example of you're not going to fix this.
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right about the mental torture that people who've been through some of the types of experiences that and not just me. I mean, there's lots of people who are out there, and some of them are in LEAP and some of them aren't. But it is a very, very difficult thing to struggle with.